Right. Are we right? Right. Good evening and welcome to the Healthy Debate. My name is Mindy. On this show, we're committed to encouraging and promoting debate on a wide variety of topics relating to health, mainly, with a wide variety of guests from all sectors of Irish life. For the moment, SARS-CoV-2, or COVID-19, whatever you like to call it, continues to dominate the news agenda. Today, we heard that the COVID payment of €350 a week will continue until March, which is good news, except when you start wondering how they're going to pay for it. In general, the number of positive tests for COVID-19 continues to fall away. There is good news, which is that for some reason flu has completely disappeared, so we're rid of one of winter's scourges, so far anyway, since it's not been that cold recently. One of the big problems with the current crisis, as we all know, is knowing what's going on from country to country and from lab to lab, because as we learned last week, the test that's used, which isn't actually a test, it's a PCR lab amplification technique for RNA, doesn't actually find anything more than viral matter. So this is a problem. Over the last week, a lab in Northern Ireland came under a lot of flack for its sloppy practices, while in Germany, Dr. Rainer Füllmark has brought his case to court. Has brought the class action case he's been preparing to court. And we expect to see an awful lot more of that in the future. He is claiming that the manufacturers of the PCR test have been mis-selling their product. So we'll expect to hear more about that in the future. Over the past week, we've heard news of miracle vaccines again. The big question is whether any vaccine will arrive before the virus has actually blown itself out, or indeed whether those vaccines will be effective against whatever mutant viruses come in the future, or different ones. Despite this, in Ireland, vaccination is seen as the only possible way of getting us back to what we call normal life. One of the main cheerleaders for vaccination is Dr. Luke O'Neill, who's just brought out a book called Never Mind the Bollocks, Here's the Science. A slightly unfortunate title if you leave out the second phrase. O'Neill, who is ever present on our TV screens and on radio, has also appeared in a number of truly eye-popping videos, which many think are at best in very dubious taste. In Dublin's Temple Bar, Flannery's pub finally had enough last week, putting a notice in its window that asked whether COVID-19 was a public health threat at all, especially when you considered the effect that locked down, masked up rulings are having on the mental health of the population, and also considering the financial ruin that many small businesses are facing. They make the interesting point, which certainly never occurred to me, that if you're asked to close, you don't actually have to. They're only advising you to do it, the same way as they only advise you to stay within 5 kilometres of your home, not to travel outside your county, etc., etc. So what they're arguing is that, in fact, it's the Gardaí that come along to tell you to close down. They're the ones breaking the law. An interesting point, which we will look into next week when we'll have legal experts on the show. So anyway, that brings us to our first guest, Deirdre Mackesy, who's the owner of a B&B in Cork and also a homeopath and acupuncturist. And Deirdre has plenty to tell us about how this whole crisis has affected us. Are you there, Deirdre?
I am, Mindy. Hello, good evening. Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. So tell us what life has been like for you over the last 8 months.
Very interesting, challenging, a good opportunity to learn a few things about myself in terms of I'm a bit like the phoenix arising out of the ashes on a regular basis. I live in Cove, County Cork, which is a heritage seaside town. It's very historic, and it was the last port of call for the ill-fated Titanic back in the day. So as a result, there's been a lot of immigrants left from Cove to go to America and Australia So they would be our tourists that we would rely on for our bread and butter, and that season would normally start after Paddy's Day.
Right.
So my book, we have these online booking systems through all the search medias like booking.com, etc. So my book was absolutely bursting to the seams, and then obviously COVID hit. And one by one, it emptied itself daily, hour by hour. And as I stand now, I don't have one booking in my system till going forward. It's shocking. So that was the first the first issue. So then we were lucky. I mean, July and August wasn't too bad with the staycations, and weekends can be good with Irish people wanting a break. But then obviously the second lockdown happened just after I became quite innovative and set up a little tapas restaurant, which was doing okay. I opened that up in July the 3rd. And now we're doing a small bit of takeout at weekends. It opens Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So then it's either I've got a mortgage and lots of overheads, and I had to leave all my staff go. I've got great friends and great family, and they help me. So I'm very blessed. But now, luckily, we're having our first wedding on the 12th of August. Sorry, the 12th of December. Small little wedding. We're allowed 25 people, and this place is perfect for small weddings and small gatherings. So that's given me the idea now of really pushing ahead for weddings going forward. So it's basically whole house rental. I've got 7 bedrooms at the moment. I would have had another 8 if I wasn't closed down. I had to stop with building another wooden chalet on the grounds. So what I've learned is you just have to keep reinventing yourself, which luckily I'm able to do. But other than that, it has been dreadful for the hospitality industry. Absolutely shocking, Lindy.
How about the rest of Cove or even Cork? What's it like?
Very bad. The rest of Cove is in the same situation as I am. Cork is bad. I mean, we would normally have a number of concerts in the summer, and there's always, we're the second capital, as you know.
Yeah.
Sorry, the real capital,
The
as you
real
know.
capital.
And no, that's been devastated as well. So we're not doing great, to be honest with you.
So if you had to ask the government to do anything, what would you be asking at the moment? I mean, answer that first, and then I'll ask you something else.
And to learn to live with COVID. I believe myself that COVID is gone. I think that I've been in the healthcare business for 40 years. I started off as a nurse many moons ago, and I follow my buddy Dolores Cahill, who I think speaks a lot of sense, and Marcus de Bruin, who I think has got a dreadful battering, as has that doctor. His name evades me. The man in Shannondock. And poor Dr. Feely, anybody who speaks out is hammered, which I think is wrong. But I just think they're not listening to anybody. We voted them in for whatever reason. They just won't listen. Locking us down is the worst thing possible. It's putting off if it's true what they're saying about these figures. I believe that they're cases, and I don't believe the death rate's gone down and the hospitals aren't spilling over. ICUs aren't congested, so we're not in that much trouble. I don't know why they're prolonging the agony. I don't know what's going on, to be honest with you. But I just think they need to stop locking down society. The economy is flattening. It's going to get worse, and we just need to learn to live with this.
Yeah, it's a tough thing, but as we know, one of the big problems, I think, is that when we protest against this, a lot of the protest days and so on are hijacked by people waving Irish flags, which, to be honest, I'm not too keen on. And how on earth do we get it through to them that we've had enough?
I really don't know. I'm not sure, because Marcus has lost his GMS list. I think Dolores has lost some of her lectureships. And people are putting their heads above the pulpit or the parapet, and they're going to get hammered. They are getting hammered. So I think a lot of people are a little bit tired of this whole situation at this stage. The people who are lucky enough to still be paddling their own canoe as such in business, but I don't know. I don't know really, to be honest with you, how
So
to
how
get through.
you also have your homeopath and acupuncture, if I'm getting that right, practice as well. Are you still getting patients, and are they different to what you might have had before COVID hit us all?
Um, yeah, I'm getting a few patients. Yeah, there's an awful lot of anxiety, depression. There's an awful lot of people who've lost their jobs. Patients who would have come to me before on a regular basis, they just don't have the money to come on stream. I just think that the mental health is definitely a big problem at the moment, and I think that needs to be addressed. Not just keeping numbers down and going for vaccination, because I'm personally not getting vaccinated because I don't think it's safe. They're bypassing the animal studies because it's a pandemic, and I'm not getting vaccinated. I'm a homeopath anyway, so I'll take homeopathic medicine, which I believe in.
So here's a tough question, because I've been trying to figure it out myself. Where do you reckon we'll all be, let's say, in June 2021? Have you any idea what you might be doing?
Well, if I'm still alive, I will be here, hopefully having resurrected the business again and expanding. Definitely, the weddings are something that I'm going forward for, because it's perfect for small little weddings. Robin Hill House and Cove is, and
Yes.
I like what I do, Lindy. I really do love what I do. So I don't see myself doing anything too different at the moment. I just have to salvage what's left of things and just get it up and running again.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, well, so thank you very much, Deirdre. I mean, I think one of the points you're making is that people who do lift their heads above the parapets are getting hammered, which is a bit unfortunate. And the viewpoints we're getting come from the daily press receptions. I've no idea why they're continuing, to be honest. And then RT and the newspapers are just repeating what they're hearing without any, nobody seems to be querying anything, that's what we're hoping to do on this program. We believe in getting a variety of views, not black and white. We want a variety of views. And
Yeah.
I think your story is one of very many in this country of people who are really suffering financial losses, apart from all the rest, the fact that it's complete madness what's going on. So all we can say is good luck, and we hope all the small weddings head down to Cove to the Robin Hill.
Thank you very much, Lindy.
You're
Thank
very
you.
welcome.
Next to you.
Okay. Right. Well, our next guest is a man who is well used to holding contrarian positions, Dr. Andrew Wren, who I remember from his campaigns to sell condoms many, many years ago, which we won't go into. And he's based in Clane in County Kildare, as many of you may know. He was also a vocal opponent of and I'm going to have to struggle with this, the fluoridation of water. So, Dr. Wren, welcome to the programme.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
So, I don't know where to start with you, because you've had a long and varied career, but are you still practicing as a doctor?
No, I deregistered from the Medical Council about 2 years ago, something I found difficult to do, but I'm very glad I did now, because I'm a free agent and I can express my views without the Medical Council breathing down my throat. That's what happened to poor Marcus Brune and Pat Morrissey. They have to watch themselves, because the Medical Council control doctors in a way that's not altogether fair. Anyway, I don't have to worry about them because I'm no longer registered. I can still call myself a doctor, which is good for my ego, but otherwise I'm free of them.
Right. So, in the later, one of the questions I've been meaning to ask doctors is how the practice of medicine has changed, say, since when you were a young doctor. What would have been the major changes between, I suppose it's, dare I say it, maybe 50 years ago when you started practicing? And what would have been the difference then and now?
When I came back from Canada in 1974, solo practice was the norm. Group practice was the exception. So most doctors practiced on their own. They generally fought with their colleagues in the next town or next village. They didn't cooperate with each other. So they were on call perhaps for, 365 days a year if they didn't try to escape through alcohol or something else. And it was terrible. And I remember my early days back in Ireland being called out of bed again and again and again, night after night, and it was very hard to get a night's sleep. So I think the one great contribution or change that was made in the 80s was the introduction of cooperation between doctors. It made a huge difference. So most general practitioners now wouldn't be on call for more than maybe one night in 6 or something like that. So it makes life worth living, and cooperation between doctors and clinical societies and all that, and good conversation between doctors. That has made a big difference.
Right. So, but
what else could I say? Yeah, go on.
No, but yes, I mean, I'm glad to hear that, but I think we've also heard that there's an awful lot more pressure on doctors nowadays because patients expect to be cured maybe all the time and are likely to sue you if you get it wrong.
Well, we have to compete with Dr. Google all the time.
Yes.
So people will come in having Googled for the last 3 weeks, and they will have discovered that they have some extremely rare disease. So we have to unravel all that and unwind it. And they usually come up with a very serious disease. I mean, if you Google something like irregular bowel movements or something, you're going to come up with cancer. And that's what they have in their mind. So they've got cancer, and you've got to try and then, of course, they're also getting medical advice online and changing their medications. And so that's all a bit difficult, but that's life. That's the way life is. And then, of course, this corona thing has made life very, very difficult for general practitioners. If you have a patient, I see they introduce breast check again now today only. But if you have a patient with, let's say, passing blood and having diarrhea and losing weight, I mean, that patient, if they don't have insurance, that patient needs to have a colonoscopy as a matter of urgency, because every day that goes by without some effort to do that colonoscopy reduces their prognosis. And the doctor has to live with this. And of course, the patient comes in and says, when am I going to have my colonoscopy? And the doctor makes some kind of futile phone calls or whatever, talks to the local politician and tries to do things. But it is very difficult. And it has always been difficult to get patients seen, that is public patients. But now it's not difficult, it's just impossible.
Yeah. And when COVID came along, what did you think initially?
When COVID came along last January, February, my initial reaction was that this is a viral disease. It doesn't seem to be particularly serious. I don't know what all this is about, to be honest with you, and I still have the same feeling that it has been a total overreaction by the state and the government and the medical profession to a large extent, and by so many people. Total overreaction to something that was really trivial. Trivial might be too strong a word. I know people have lost loved ones and dear ones, but they were mostly older people. Not that they should, we can't dismiss that. But it is not a serious disease. It is not a deadly virus. It has a mortality rate across the board of something like 0.2%.
Yeah.
That's not a serious disease. Look what they've done to the country. Look at Deirdre there, your last guest.
Yeah.
I mean, she's struggled through because she's got other strings to her bow. But I know a lot of people, and so do you, hairdressers and people who set themselves up in business, the gym and publicans and all that kind of thing, who have literally been put out of business and forever. And people have been made seriously depressed by all these unnecessary, in my view, restrictions.
Well, we had Pat Morrissey on last week, and he was because he's still in practice, and he was describing something that I hadn't really realised, that alcoholics are really, really struggling, that he's having them come in as patients now, and they've been not drinking for years and they're back on the bottle, and mental health issues, obviously, and as well as the people who are ill and need tests. So there's a whole, it's like, I don't know, what do they call it? The iceberg. We're seeing the tip of the iceberg, and underneath there's all these other terrible problems, really. Not to mention elective surgeries and so on, so the people are in pain.
Yes. Well, Pat Morrissey's the lad who'll tell you about that, and that's all occult. That's all under. People don't realise what's going on behind the scenes. Of course, the other thing that we have to watch every night, if we're stupid enough to continue to watch RTE News at 6 o'clock, and I stopped watching it because it just makes me too depressed, is that they're telling us there's 185 new cases. There's no such thing as 185 new cases. These are cases of nothing.
Yeah.
And so that's the first lie. Then there's 6 more deaths. Well, they could make that 16 or 4 or 3. They can make it anything they like, because they count the deaths of anybody who died, be they run over by a steamroller or drown themselves or anything else, who happened to test positively to Corona-19. They call them Corona-19 deaths. So the deaths are wrong and dishonest, and the new cases are dishonest and wrong. And if they just told us the truth and said there's no new cases of people who died from corona on its own, without comorbidity, without any other disease, the following is the number of people who died from coronavirus on its own is 0. And it probably is 0, it'd be maybe 1 or 2 a month. It'd be something like that.
Yeah, I've been wondering whether you could actually die from coronavirus, or indeed any virus, whether you actually die from it at all. A bit like I was saying off camera that my father had Alzheimer's, but on his death cert it says sepsis. But we all know he died of dementia.
Yeah.
And I've been wondering the same.
Yeah. Okay, well, of course, you have to wait a few months until you get the coroner's report on that. But I do believe that a person could die from influenza who was basically healthy, because most of those influenzas affect your lungs.
Yeah.
I had a terrible influenza myself 2 years ago, and I thought I was going to die, except I was too sick to die. I couldn't be bothered trying. It was just terrible. And I was coughing and doing all these things. But thanks be to God, I'm fairly fit and keep myself half right. But I think a healthy person could be killed by coronavirus, but that would be extremely rare.
Yeah, yeah. No, I've just wondered about it because I know that I can't remember, it's close to 2,000 they claim, except for they've started reporting them in a different way now. But I think the last time I looked, it was maybe 157 that had no comorbidities that they know of yet, because in fairness to the people doing the statistics, they do change them and update them fairly regularly.
Yes, they'd be mostly very old people, unfortunately. And again, I'm not dismissing that. But the number of people who've died under the age of 40 from coronavirus on its own is only a handful, if even a handful, 3 or 4 people, as far as we know.
And they're all, yeah, there was one poor lad, and you know the family said he's had chronic heart problems since he was born, for instance. Yeah. But he was put down as a coronavirus death, and they objected quite rightly.
Yes.
You know. So anyway, we move on to the contentious subject of masks. So what would your view be on masks? Are they helping anything, or?
Well, first of all, wearing a mask forces you to breathe in your own carbon dioxide, and that's a serious thing. It reduces your oxygen intake, and that's not good. This is not good for your immune system. It's not good for your... I don't know. I hate the whole thing of masks, but people have taken to it like ducks to water, and they just seem to love them. But that aside, my own prejudice aside, a good-sized study was done, as you know, last week in Denmark. Yeah. How many did they have? I think now 4,800, something like that. Almost 5,000 people were put on this study, run over 3 or 4 months. So it's a pretty powerful study. You can quibble with anything if you want to, but they divided the group into 2. One group, they gave them facial masks and told them, wear these now, put them on all the time when you're going out and blah, blah, blah. The other group, they didn't give any instructions to. And then they studied both groups after about 4 months to see if there's any significant difference in the amount of disease, Corona-19, that they got. And there was not any significant disease between the 2 groups. In other words, in plain English, they found that wearing a mask is a useless exercise. And I think that's fair enough. That'll do me. And I always thought it was as well.
Well, I read that study insofar as I could. One of the things I found very interesting about it was that if you could read it both ways. And what I found really interesting about it made me consider other tests and trials that they're doing, including the vaccine trials, is how imperfect most of those trials are, because they said in that test that a significant number of the people didn't put the masks on properly, blah, 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 blah. I think about 47% or something didn't go through the ritual properly. And it made me realise that all these trials and tests for a so-called disease that we're not even sure what it is, there's question marks over it all.
There is, but of course, I think what that Danish study tried to do was disprove the thesis that wearing a mask reduces your chances of getting coronavirus by 50%.
Yeah.
And there certainly was no evidence to support that. And of course, your point about people fiddling around with a mask and wearing it for days and days without washing it. I mean, a facial mask is supposed to be completely sterile, and it never is. And we know that, and that's the imperfection of the whole thing. But nonetheless, the Danish study it told me anyway that there's very little point in wearing a facial mask. And that used to be the stance of the World Health Organization as well. So they're prone to changing their mind from time to time, depending on who's in there.
Did you, in your practice, did you ever wear a mask for any reason, as a doctor?
No, I didn't. And I'm old enough now to remember when we used to wear masks when I was assisting at surgery. In Canada, GPs had to assist at surgery every morning, and we wore masks. And then shortly after that, in America and elsewhere, surgeons stopped using masks. And even then, surgeons very often had their nose out over the mask, which made wearing the mask an exercise of futility of the highest order. As I once said, wearing a mask with your nose sticking out over it is about as useful as wearing a condom with the end of it cut off.
Right. Now, the white paper. Sorry. Yeah, that's a good one. That is a good one. You signed that. If they're calling it the white paper, the paper that was signed, that was sent to the government, a letter that was sent to the government, and you were one of 15 signatories originally. And could you tell us a bit about that white paper, because it really hasn't got much in the way of publicity, and there has been some controversy about it anyway.
Well, the white paper is the mission statement, if you like, of that group of doctors who got together to try and get some honesty into this whole debate. And it lays out various things, including the wearing of masks. And it was kind of neutral on that question. This white paper was written about 6 weeks ago now, before the Danish study. It was neutral on it. It said, wear the mask if you like or not. And I asked a lot of my Facebook friends, of which I have quite a few, surprisingly, to have a look at it and sign it. And it was signed by a lot of my friends and by a lot of doctors in good faith that it wouldn't be changed. 2 weeks ago, it was changed without the permission or without any consultation of doctors to say that face masks should be worn not only indoors, but outdoors as well. And this is totally not what we signed up to. And it is causing embarrassment, it's causing problems, but hopefully we can get it together and get back to the original white paper that people signed. If that doesn't happen, then I'm going to get out of this group, because there's no point in being in it. It's making me sign up to something that I don't believe in. But anyway, I hope that works out, because I think the group is useful and powerful and will and could change government policy, because it's full of experts and people who understand statistics and people who can explain these things. It's been led by somebody who's extremely good, but he has no idea how to run a group of people. Democracy doesn't seem to come into it. But hopefully we'll get it together, because I don't want to walk away from it. No, I don't mind either. It's not the end of the world. Of course, I might join you crowd if it happened.
Well, what was I going to say about that? That the if I remember rightly, the theme was something that that COVID was a crisis, but that we need a more how do we get out of this mess? I think is the main theme of the paper, isn't it?
The way out of this mess is not to sit around and hope that the government is going to change, that NEFIT is going to change. They will never change. Peter Houlihan is stuck in stone, and he will never change, and he will never admit that he's wrong. And there's a power thing in it as well, of course. Let's control these people. Let's instill fear, and they'll do what you like. It's very interesting human behaviour that we've seen in this country in the last 9 months or 10 or a year almost. How you can control people. So that is not going to change through logical debate or even through science.
Yeah.
Therefore, I think it's going to last for as long as people let it last. There's a poem that David Icke talks about. Said, "We are many and they are few," and that is true. We are many. We, the people, have the power, and I can't, for the life of me, understand why people who are members, let's say, of Witness License Association, why don't they say next December the 15th we are opening? All 1,000 of us are opening. That'll make a change, because the government now think they can do what they like. We have to stand up to this. I'm not the owner of a small business, but if I was retail or hairdresser or whatever, I would subscribe to that. There has to be some civil disobedience. And you're being disobedient to nonsense. You're not being disobedient to cause harm.
Yeah.
So I think that unless or until we take this thing into our own hands and gently, not gently, but just go and do it. Open the pubs, open your restaurants, sell your clothes. Like that lady with her bed and breakfast, open it up, let people in, and just do it, because they can't charge 4,000 people. And there isn't enough spaces in our prisons to put us all to jail. They'll fine us, we won't pay the fine. And we'll argue that this is it is a constitutional right of every individual and every citizen of this country to make a living. That is your constitutional right. And you need to make a living so that you can feed your children and do all these other things. And it is your constitutional right also to hold on to your bodily integrity. Therefore, you shouldn't be forced to wear a mask, because that is contrary to your bodily integrity. And of course, when it comes to vaccine, that's another day's work, which we'll see.
Yeah, well, the vaccine, we're going to look into the vaccines, because, as I said earlier there, what fascinates me about the vaccine is that I'm looking at the tests, I'm looking at the results. They don't really impress me. I'm thinking the human immune system is just as good as that. It will produce the same. And we don't, once again, having looked at the Danish mask thing, I thought, you need to know the age of people, need to know the state of their health, you need to know how exactly they were picked. There's all kinds of variables that, when they're testing the vaccines, I would like to know more. And I firmly believe that by the time they do come out, that there won't be any virus around anyway. But here's another question. In your life, has there ever been an organisation like NEFIT that has had a medical reason for shutting down the country? Can you recall anything?
No, nothing. No, not even at the time. And I suppose I'm old enough to have seen the edge of tuberculosis, for instance.
Yes.
Far more serious disease, or polio. I'm old enough to remember schoolmates of mine. I went to school in Prosperous in County Kildare, who contracted polio before the vaccination was invented, and there was no lockdown. But particularly in Old Brown's time, I suppose, and before, tuberculosis was absolutely gutting the country. There was hardly a house in Ireland, and that's not an exaggeration, hardly a house in Ireland in the 40s or 30s and 40s that didn't have a member in there who had polio, who had tuberculosis, or consumption, as they called it.
Consumption. There was also those fever hospitals, weren't there, come to think of it?
Yes, there were. with one right beside us here called Fairmount, and the fever hospitals, which then became ordinary hospital. Peamount would be a good example of
Yes,
it.
yeah, I remember that one.
Blanchardstown would be another very good example. Used to sit people out in the verandas so as to get plenty of fresh air. They used to sleep outside because they thought fresh air was good for them. It certainly wasn't bad for them. And then very occasionally, if things were going really bad, they'd burn the house down. You know, there was
Really?
there's 6 cases, let's say,
Yeah.
of tuberculosis in this house. We burned the house. Of course, they'd give them compensation and so on, they'd rehouse them. But as for a national lockdown, no, never. Even though it's far more reason to do so.
Yeah,
Far more.
I'm wondering how many people actually died of TB compared to, say, corona.
Oh,
An interesting statistic.
more people probably died from suicide due to the lockdowns than have died from corona.
Yeah.
The number of people who died from corona is only minuscule. Consumption, tuberculosis was a huge killer. Huge. You just go back to the census and see, or look at the death certs in any parish in Ireland in the 40s and 50s, and you see people dying. And we all have relatives, even though I don't seem to have, but most of us would have relatives who have died from it. It was devastating. There was no treatment for it, don't forget, until penicillin came along.
Penicillin.
Products.
And then the vaccine. I mean, I think wasn't.
Yeah, the BCG. Yeah, well, that made a difference. You know, I'm not anti-vaccine across the board. Of course, the BCG made a difference, and the chest X-ray, an ability to diagnose it, made a difference. But that's what made the difference in the long term. And there was no lockdown. There was no panic. There were no fixed masks. People still went to mass and had weddings or did whatever. Life went on.
Oh,
But
yeah.
what we've got now is lifeless. It's horrible. And, you know, I'm so glad to be allowed to sit here and talk to you because it gives me some kind of sense of normality.
Well, I have a theory. Of course, I have a theory. I have a theory that the big problem isn't us, the people. The big problem is that layer of middle management that drives us all completely crazy. The people who love to say no. The 3 managers that every nurse has or every person working in the HSE, that they're sitting around. They've got a job that occupies maybe an hour of their time in the day. So they've got another 7 hours to do something. And what do? They torment us. And I just feel that maybe that's part of the problem, that there's far too many managers and not enough. You know, there's far too many, like the people, when you look at the 35 people on NEFIT, for instance. Why have they 35 people? You know,
No chiefs and no Indians. You can't
what?
find an Indian anywhere. Yeah, well, there's also the problem of power and ego that have to be satisfied, and just human behaviour. But what's going on at the moment is very toxic, and I think a lot of people are getting very, very sick of it. Though I find when I'm talking to people about this, I'm on my own by and large, with some very refreshing exceptions. Mostly people will say, go away with that, you know, you're talking nonsense, this is grand, I'm going to wear a mask, I'm going to keep my distance, I'm not going to go to pubs even if they are open. And people are, well, of course, that people will behave themselves very odd.
You just died there for a second. You froze. Unintentionally. No, you're still alive, I know that. No, but
Do you think I stopped it?
No, but I do a bit of running, as most people know me. And I was out for a run on Saturday and it started raining, so I thought, right, I'm going to pelt my way back to the house. And there was a little old lady older than me under a brolly with her mask, and she literally cowered away from me into the gates of a nearby, you know, the driveway. And I just thought, what have we done to people? I mean, I'm not sick. I'm not remotely sick. I'm passing you for a nanosecond, and you think I'm going to make you die? You know, what's happened?
Well, it's fear. It's television. It's the news, and the newspapers, incidentally, aren't much better. The Irish Times. the Irish Times I get on my online, and they just seem to hate any good news. They love bad news, and they keep feeding it out to people, and people love that as well. Just love it.
Yeah, no, it's as a journalist myself, though unemployed as it happens, thanks to COVID, because there's no sport about.
Oh, you're supposed
There's
yeah.
no. I mean, I coach kids, and we're told to put them in little pods and all sorts of things. And I won't get started. I'll get myself into trouble if I say anything. But they're pulling all the joy out of life. And when I see children not being allowed to play, I mean, for heaven's sake, or a little group of 5 or 6 year olds I saw walking along the road with their arms like that. I mean, it's head wrecking actually. And as you say, we have to rebel. I mean, what's happened to the Fighting Irish? I'd like to know.
We have to rebel, and I think rebellion is the only way forward. And I don't like to say that because, you know, we like to be and think of ourselves as law-abiding citizens. But there's no point in continuing to abide by this law because they're not going to change it otherwise. And of course, I got my lesson from the time of Charles Haughey's Irish Solution to the Irish Problem. We won't go into that, where you weren't allowed to sell condoms. You had to put them on a doctor's prescription. I just went out and broke that law and embarrassed the government into changing it.
Yeah.
You can't change law unless you're a politician, unless you're in it all. But you can break it. That's your option.
Well, at the same time, as you rightly said earlier on, that we all have a right to earn a living, to move freely, to hug our families, all these things, and we're being told that these are all. I mean, it's quite extraordinary that they've been able to strip our humanity from us. Have you got grandchildren?
No, I don't. I have children, but I have no grandchildren.
Oh dear.
I won't put any right into that. That doesn't matter. I mean, that's the way life is. And I don't have any grandparents either because they're dead. But I have the greatest sympathy for people who have a granny in a nursing home and they can't go in and visit her properly. That's at that end of the spectrum. And at the other, as you alluded to there a few minutes ago, we should think about that even more, is what it's doing to our children. Yeah. And what it will continue to do to our children when they get older. They'll remember all this. And there's a disease called neurosis, compulsive neurosis, where you have to keep washing your hands. We're going to get an awful lot of that. And people are going to be very busy treating that. And little girls are going to, you know, it's going to have consequences. And having to wear a mask in school when you're trying to learn something, the utmost sympathy for the children and for the parents who object to this and who seem to be powerless. And of course, the school teachers themselves are jumping up and down. Though I suppose I have some sympathy for them as well. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I do a bit of teaching in a school that I won't mention, but I've seen since September that I only do a few hours a week. I've seen I deal with 15 and 16-year-olds, and they're just losing their spirit. You know, I'm able to take them out of the building, fortunately, because it's for sport, but it's just horrible. It's horrible what's been done to them. They were supposed to be off on work experience and they couldn't do it. You know, just small, normal things that they just can't do because I sort of said, why won't they let you sort of go into an office? Oh, we're coming from a school of 800 people and they'd be frightened we'd be bringing in some kind of virus. And you're thinking, how did this happen? I mean, I keep thinking it's a dream and I'll wake up. It's madness.
It is madness. I agree with you, and I agree with everything you said there. It's fear, and it's neurosis, and it's becoming a bit of a cult as well. You know, do you believe in this or do you not? Like, do you believe in God? Kind of stuff. And but it's not fair, and it's awful. And people are living, but they're only just about. And you can't go on with this forever and ever. And Micheál Martin today was, I think, hinting that after Christmas, which he is going to allow us to enjoy, there will be more lockdowns. You can't keep lurching from lockdown to lockdown. It's not the way to do it. Take a leaf out of the book of Sweden, for example, which they don't like to do. They don't like to mention Sweden. They're not interested in that kind of laissez-faire attitude to this harmless virus. Sweden have done extremely well. They've no increase in suicide and so on, and they don't wear masks, and people are still in business, and people haven't been shut down.
Well, Stephen, our producer here, he was in Stockholm last weekend and made a little film that people can have a look at. But what really struck me about it was that when they were asked questions about coronavirus, it was nearly as if they weren't interested. It was, and yet, if you put up, as I did, a link to that film on Facebook, I got dogs abuse. That, oh no, it's all lies. Sweden, it's their economic, their economy is in tatters and all the rest. The same as here when you sort of say to people, you do realise that the excess deaths is no worse than any other year. They just don't want to listen.
Well, that's exactly it. And I was talking to my local undertaker.
All right.
I wasn't booking a thing with him. I said, how's business? He said there has never been quieter. But Sean Riley here in Prosperous is a very busy undertaker generally. Never been quieter, he said. I don't think I have any sympathy for him, but it is interesting to talk to people who know what's going on the ground. And there is no excess in deaths, as you rightly point out. And that should tell you everything.
Yeah. That's interesting about the undertaker, though. That do you know what I've been wondering? And you'd probably kill me for saying this. I've been wondering: are more people living because they're not going to doctors? Is staying away from doctors a good thing?
Well, I've always preached that. I've always said, don't go near a doctor unless you've got good reason to, because they'll keep looking for something and eventually really find it. I've been very anti-doctor in a way, but look after your health. You're the first person that's going to, like you do. You take exercise, and you probably eat very careful, and you don't smoke. And you just don't do these things, and you'll be grand.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? Well, the whole world is just not listening to us, as we know. But I think that's probably a really good note to end a delightful conversation with you. Dr. Wren, and you can go back to your glass of wine now.
Who?
I did spot it. Okay. Thanks very much, Dr. Wren.
Bye.
Okay. Right. So we're nearly done. Next week, we're into the final week of lockdown. You may not have noticed. And rumour has it that from next Wednesday, we'll be back to something like level 3, apparently. Oh, wait, I'll move to that camera. With shops and gyms and possibly restaurants and bars reopening. And as Dr. Wren rightly says, develop a bit of a spine and just let's start standing up to the government and reopening. They can't really shut us down. We're hoping that sports like golf, when I said to somebody, I cannot understand why they're banning golf. I was told, oh yeah, but the people socialise before and afterwards. I thought, oh, give me strength. And tennis. And I'm hoping, of course, being completely selfish, that athletics and my other sport of orienteering will be back. Right, well, here's a small story for you all to ponder. It may or may not be true. Last autumn in China, medics observed an increase in what they called atypical pneumonia. One medic fell ill with the disease and sent a message to his friend. That friend posted the message on social media. It went viral, an appropriate word as it happens. Result, we're living with it. So is COVID-19 the first pandemic largely created by social media? Have a think about that one. So we're nearly finished, we're nearly done now. But don't forget that this programme, The Healthy Debate, is produced for you by a small band of volunteers. Special thank you tonight to Stephen and Danny, who looked after, they're over there. Most of the people are from Health Freedom Ireland and the Irish Inquiry, which is a platform for alternative type of programmes. If you want to throw us a few bob, we won't say no. Details are on the Health Freedom Ireland website. Good night.